The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, pretty big milestone week for a couple of different players around the National Hockey League. And with respect to Alexander Ovechkin, who became the first and is still currently the only player to score 900 career goals, I want to start with Nazem Kadri, who played his 1,000th career game. Obviously still a member of the Calgary Flames, plays that game on Wednesday against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Great presentation. Just a really good moment for a guy that a lot of people, I think, respect around the league. But what's interesting, even before that 1,000th game, is his future. We know where the Calgary Flames are in the standings. We've spoken about them and what could be next for what Craig Conroy management could do with certain guys like Rasmus Andersson. But there's been a lot of talk about what could be next for Nazem Kadri. And this week, your colleague Darren Dreger taking this info from Murray Edwards, saying that, you know what, they might not be as interested in moving on from Nazem Kadri. What do you make of Nazem Kadri's place with the Calgary Flames and his potential future? Do you think the Flames are better off not moving on from him? Let's break this story down.
Yeah, let me start here. That 1,000th game barrier was one of those ones that hit me in the chest, and I'm like, oh man, I'm getting old, because it was very easy for me to reflect on being in the draft in Montreal the night that Nazem Kadri was drafted by the Maple Leafs. You might remember at the time, Brian Burke went over to Brian Murray of the Ottawa Senators and kind of rubbed his nose in the fact the Leafs were taking Kadri, not letting him fall to Ottawa. That was the John Tavares draft. Matt Duchene. Was Victor Hedman in that draft? Yeah, I think so.
I believe he would have been number 2 behind.
Sorry,
John
I don't
Tavares.
have the whole class memorized. What I'm literally drawing off of is memories from my own brain. Like, I actually have like distinct. Like, I can even remember where we went to do a scrum with Brian Burke at the hotel the Leafs were staying at. Like, I know where it is. Like, every time, this is weird because I go to Montreal a lot and I've been there a lot over the years, but I walk past that hotel, I think of going in there to do the Brian Burke scrum for whatever reason. So the point is, I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, it's like kind of a dingy hotel that an NHL team wouldn't stay at too often, but pretty close to the Bell Center. It's a long way of saying. And then I was there the night that Nazem Kadri played his first NHL game. He was called up to play one game against the San Jose Sharks while he was still a member of the London Knights. The Leafs ran into an emergency situation with their roster. So he got one game at that point, and then obviously he has had the career he's had. But, you know, I covered Nazem pretty closely for the first 2/3 of his career. I was there the night he won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. And so anyway, it's just not to make it about me, but I did think, like, when this guy's doing the whole 1,000 game silver stick thing, like, because I remember a lot of those 1,000 games, like, first person, you know, and you're right. It's going to be an interesting situation with what comes next, because, you know, Kadri isn't a young guy by hockey standards. He's 35. Still reasonably productive. Certainly the competitive fire seems to be there. You know, maybe you have some concerns about the length of his contract if you want to trade for him. But that being said, we're also in this rising cap environment where I think, you know, $7 million isn't what it once was. You could maybe, you know, trade for a player like that and in 2 years' time, you know, not feel so bad even if his production is dipped just because of age-related decline. Yeah, will Calgary let him go, or does Calgary want him to go? That's the question, and certainly I have no reason to, you know, dispute or raise any issues with Darren Dreger's report. You know, this is one where kind of tells you something about the Flames, right? And I feel like in some ways, even going back a number of years, they've been caught between two spots. I mean, they've certainly resisted doing what we might call a full scale rebuild. I don't know if they've done a rebuild at all. I mean, they kind of retooled on the fly. With some of the moves they've made. And obviously they did move off a bunch of players that were pending UFAs a couple seasons ago, you know, but they've resisted doing what Utah did or what Anaheim did, what we were seeing in Chicago and San Jose. Won't mention Buffalo because that one's a bit radioactive, but you know what I'm saying? Like the trade away very useful veteran pieces to restock the cupboard kind of act. I mean, that's what they could do with a player like Kadri. I think they could do it with others on the roster as well. But I don't see them, even though as we're recording this are right near the bottom of the NHL standings, I don't see them wanting to bottom out. And so I would just say this, we have to see where this one goes, because that might be the the posture at this point in time, because I was never thinking Kadri was going to play his 1,000th game and then he was going to get traded 2 days later. I mean, I do think that if you get to the point you're moving him, I mean, first of all, he does have some no trade protection. So it's more complex, I guess, in a sense, how they navigate that. But, he could be a premier asset at this trade deadline if they get to their minds around potentially moving him, just because the center market is very thin at this stage. I heard it again from another GM this week, not related to Kadri specifically, but he was telling me he'd love to get a center for his team. He's like, they're just not out there. I don't know what to tell you. There's just none out there. And so, if the Flames got there, I think it could be very rewarding for freshening things up. Right now they're saying no, but let's see. We still got December, January, February, March. We got 4 months basically till the trade deadline, right on the dot. So there is time for the thinking on this to evolve or change.
Yeah. You know what's funny? When I heard that report, there was 85% of me that said, yeah, I think the Flames want to commit to this core and the players that they have, because they still feel that they have something. If they get the right players around them, they could be a playoff team. And there's like a 15% chance, 15% part of me that said, what if this was just a way to drum up interest in Nazem Kadri? Like, what if this was a way to be like, oh, well, we don't want to move him. We'd much rather keep him. And then you try to just lure some teams in to make a deal. Like, I don't know. Like, I at this point with this team, you could say all you want that you want to compete and you want to go for the playoffs. You are much closer to competing for Gavin McKenna than anything else. Like, at some point, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? Let's look at the deals that are out there and see what return we can get. And I get it. You don't want to necessarily make the wrong move, but I mean, there are some teams that need a second line center. And if Nazem Kadri is made available, I'm sure they could make some deal work.
Well, and what it comes down to is when do you expect to be really good again? And what would Nazem Kadri be at that point? Right. And if you kind of conclude that those timelines don't line up, then it makes sense to at least have the conversation. Should we move him? Because a player is more than just his production on a hockey DB page. Obviously there's culture type of impacts. Kadri's been around the league a long time. He is a respected veteran player. He is competitive. He's not afraid to call people out. Like, I think he improves a team. And so he's bringing value to the Flames even right now, even in a tough season. I think because of his attitude and his approach beyond even just what he contributes with goals and assists. That being said, I mean, he's also going to have a say here eventually. And I've got no reason at this stage to think that he wants out, but let's say it's another year of losing and we're back here next fall and the Flames are in a similar spot. I mean, that's another factor that could weigh in here eventually. It's not one right now. I mean, in fact, Nazem Kadri wanted to get through this milestone. I think he was very proud to do it as a Flame. He obviously chose them in free agency a few summers ago. He's seen some better days in Calgary. I mean, it's kind of turned here the last few months, but in terms of the team's performance, but I think he's committed there. The question always becomes, how long can you endure that? I mean, I see some echoes in what's going on in Nashville right now with Calgary, just because it's the same spot. Like all those guys on the Predators love living in Nashville. Nashville is a very attractive NHL market for players. It's a great organization. They've got a great fan base. I mean, it's not a place players want out of, but here they are, their second season. Last year went totally not in the way that anyone with the Predators wanted. Here they are kind of skidding around 500 this year and not really looking like there's reason to believe there's improvement coming. Eventually those veteran guys, as much as they love it there, I feel like they're not going to want to be there forever. And I feel like it's not going to be in the organization's best interest either. If you have an aging out team and it's pretty clear you're not headed towards winning anything, much like Calgary, I think that it's a great spot for the family, that the organization treats them well. Look, there's even a new rink coming in Calgary. Like, there's lots of reasons for, I think, especially if you're a younger Flames player, to want to be there. This isn't a mass exodus, but at a certain point, if the winning isn't around and your career's dwindling to some degree, I just think it's only natural that you're going to see players moved on. And so, I don't want to say anything declarative on the Kadri situation, just because right now, okay, Ownership isn't of a mind to move him. He's happy in Calgary. He's had this nice milestone night. So cute. I don't know if you saw Julian, but his daughter read out the starting lineup in the Flames dressing room before the game. If you haven't seen that, I would urge you to get in your feels and go on your socials and find that clip, because it was very heartwarming to see her reading that out. But it doesn't mean to me that he's going to be there forever. It just doesn't seem to be anything imminent. I guess now I got to wrestle. I got a trade board due in the next 2 weeks. I mean, is there room for Kadri on it given this report? I mean, that's something I got to wrestle with. But I still think there is, because teams are going to want him, right? Like, go around the league, Montreal, Vancouver. Like, there's so many teams that would love a center. And how many impact ones might move? Like, would Ryan O'Reilly move? I don't know. But there's not that many centers that are out there. I mean, frankly, it's a lot of the names that we were kind of kicking around last year. Like, I'm thinking, like, it's not going so well in St. Louis right now. Would Braden Shen maybe be someone that the Blues? It's a lot of the guys that we at least mentioned in some way, shape, or form at last year's deadline might be the same names floating around this season.
I'm glad you mentioned Nashville, because I'm also intrigued about them. And Ryan O'Reilly specifically, did you see his media avail on Thursday night where he was pretty harsh on himself? He
was. And he said he's only had one good season in his career, which,
like, that's not true.
No, I mean, we're talking about a guy who made the NHL at 18 as a second round pick, which is very difficult to do. He's been around the league a long time. I think it's a reflection, though, of obviously the frustration that's building behind the scenes there. And he's putting a lot on himself. In Nashville, Ryan O'Reilly is the top line center. Now, that wouldn't be the case. If it ever gets to a point that they would move on from him, that wouldn't be the case anywhere he's being traded. I think a team would be bringing him in to sort of strengthen what they have behind their top line. But he's putting pressure and weight on himself to help them have a better season. And it's obviously not going his way or the team's way. And, Nashville, to me, they just seem like a misconstructed team. They signed two scoring wingers in the same free agency, Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos. Like, they don't have enough playmaking centers to play with guys like that to maximize their talents. Ryan O'Reilly, a very good player. And I'm not saying you can't win at all with him as your first line center. I think you can in a certain construction, but he's not a high octane offensive guy. He's a 200 footer, right? He's known for, even when he was with St. Louis, like that was a different built kind of team. That was a true 4-line team that won that Stanley Cup back in 2019. They rolled their lines. They didn't come at you with just one scoring threat that the other team had to neutralize. It's just hard not to look at those comments and just realize, A, I think it's getting very difficult for the Predators and their players. And B, obviously he's a pretty motivated athlete. The one thing I'll tell you about O'Reilly is, if the Predators ever trade him, and it's still an if, he doesn't have the trade protection, but they're still treating him as though he does. They're still treating him as though he has a full no movement clause. So nothing would ever happen involving Ryan O'Reilly specifically, unless he was fully on board with it, if he was essentially giving a thumbs up or signing off on it. Doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's going to, in his frustration, be like, I want out of here. I don't think that'll happen at all, but it just could get to a spot there this season, I think, with the Predators where they're looking at selling some of their guys, because, I don't see any immediate hope on the horizon. And the timelines on the careers of some of these players is not particularly long, where Nashville is going to be a playoff contender, let alone a Stanley Cup contender.
You think there could be anything for a guy like Steven Stamkos? I get he's got 2 more years left on his deal, but this is a guy who signed in Nashville to win after everything he went through in Tampa Bay through his career and the end. I wonder maybe is if someone had, I'm sure teams would be interested if it got to that point, but what do you think about his situation?
I think it's similar to O'Reilly's in the sense that, it definitely could get to a spot where we're talking about him being traded. Now, he is not filling the net the way we're used to seeing. And obviously last year was even a step back offensively. I do think some of that is not having the right players to play with. Having to play a certain style for the Predators to win is not particularly offensive. So I think you have to take some of the numbers besides Stamkos' name with a grain of salt. Like, I think if you're a team that has maybe a little more offensive ability on your roster, but you're missing a pure sniper that he could still fit in somewhere else. The question ultimately for me is going to come down to, what will Nashville do with retaining on his contract? I mean, it's hard to see a contending team taking on the full boat, but if they get to a point where they would consider retaining some salary or taking back another contract to offset the money, I could see it getting to that point. I mean, in the short term, Stamkos is, I know he loves living in Nashville. Like, again, off ice is a bit amazing, but he's a competitive guy. And sure, the Lightning were a bit down and out when they drafted him first overall, and had another season where they kind of bottomed out prior to hiring John Cooper in that 12-13 season. But I mean, he played on teams that were very good for 90+% of his career. He was a star for the Lightning. He was the straw that stirred the drink. Been to 4 Stanley Cup finals. I can't imagine he's going to go out career-wise with a whimper. I think at some point we're going to see him play somewhere else. It just might take some time. It might not happen this season because of those 2 years on his deal, because I don't know if the Predators will be of a mind to eat some of that contract. I mean, I think similarly about Jonathan Marchessault, who obviously joined the team on the same day as Stamkos, a former Conn Smythe winner himself from Vegas's Cup year. I can see a set of circumstances where, he'd be open to being moved in the latter parts of the season potentially. But, it just really, it's going to come down to which teams would want these players because they have trade protection. They're not going to go just anywhere, but a lot of, if you're a contending team, you might look at it and think you're buying low on these guys and that they can do it in a specific window for your group. I mean, I still got baseball on the mind, right? But you might be thinking that you get a Max Scherzer kind of performance out of some of these players the way the Blue Jays did, where he doesn't have to be, he's not going to, win MVP awards at this stage of his career, but his experience is worth something, his commitment, his competitive nature, what he can do for your locker room. And I still think, the one thing Steven Stamkos has not lost is his shot. I mean, his shot was special when he was playing in Sarnia, and NHL teams were scouting him in the Ontario Hockey League. It's been special. It's allowed him to score as many goals as it already has. And so, if you're a team that maybe could use a bit of a scoring jolt and you've got a place to put him in your lineup, I think he can help. We're getting ahead of ourselves here on November 7th with the conversation. I think the reason we're having it though is because the writing is starting to be on the wall in both situations with the Flames and the Predators, that this isn't going to be a season that ends with playoff games in those cities unless something really crazy happens. And so what do you do with your veteran talent? I think that's big decisions for Barry Trotz and Craig Conroy.
Before I ask you about one more team and their situation, one point that you've made over the last few months that continues to ring true is the necessity of those older playoff knowledgeable veterans who can win, like a Brad Marchand, who obviously did his thing with the Florida Panthers after being traded from Boston. And just, it's not lost on me that we're just going through a segment where Nazem Kadri's being mentioned, Ryan O'Reilly's being mentioned, Steven Stamkos, guys who are in their mid-30s who know a thing or two about going through the playoffs, who would still be able to bring some value to teams. It's more just an observation than anything else. But of all the different points you've made on this show, you've never been more, maybe not more right, but you've definitely been hella right on this.
It's good to know I've been right every once in a while about something,
I think your hit rate's pretty good.
We spend a lot of time talking into these mics. There's going to be some fumbles, some foibles out there, but it's good to think something can be learned. The other thing I look at right now, like look at a team like Anaheim, Julian, and they've been one of the nice stories of this season. Guess who's helping drive that success? Yes, it's the young players that they've drafted. I mean, Leo Carlsson off to a huge start. Beckett, Sednicki, awesome start to his career. Other young guys driving that. But Chris Kreider's there, and he's had a really hot start scoring-wise for the Ducks. They traded for Jacob Trouba. He's playing a big role in that team. They signed Alex Killorn a couple years ago, Steven Stamkos' old buddy. Like, even if you're a team, I think there's two ways to look at players like where Stamkos is today. He can be a piece that gets a team that's really close over the top or can really augment a group trying to win a cup today. But maybe you're selling him on we're an up-and-coming team that actually is ready to take a step into the playoffs. You can be a bridge piece for us. And I think that there's a world where that makes sense for him too. I mean, again, it's going to come down to city opportunity, what he hears. I would think that if it ever got to this stage, he's talking to the GM or the coach or both before any trades happening. But it would come down to his comfort level with that. But I think that's another way to look at the use case for some of these guys. And, let's not rush just because it's getting to be a younger league and we all get excited by the brand new toy. I do too. I've been loving watching Macklin Celebrini in the start of the season. To me, he's been one of the most exciting players in the entire league this year. And part of it is just, you're seeing his potential be realized. You're seeing, you start to go how good can he be? That's part of the excitement, but let's not throw everyone out with the bathwater, right? I still watch the playoffs like last year very closely as you did. There was a lot of guys with gray in their beards have an impact. And frankly, I just watched the game on Thursday night. Corey Perry scored a goal in that game for the LA Kings, and Brad Marchand scored a goal for the Florida Panthers in the same game. Two guys that are literally my age. They can also remember Nazem Kadri's draft. So the point being is, there's still use for these guys. It becomes getting them in the right situation. Obviously, contracts are a big part of it too. And that we'll have to see how that all shakes out with Stamkos, because, is he sitting on 2 or 3 goals to start this season and you're making $8 million? I mean, there's no one knocking down the door at this stage to get that in. But I think it could be different by March.
By the way, I hope this episode is titled "Unc Still Got It." You ever
Unc
see that meme
it.
of that one? There's this old uncle looking dude with a skipping rope, and he's skipping rope while sitting down, and then the caption says "Unc Still Got It."
I have not seen that meme, but it's very appropriate for what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Anyway, I wanted to get to one more team before I go through the rest of the rundown. What do you think about what's going on with the St. Louis Blues? A team near the bottom of the standings, actually only 2 more points up than the Calgary Flames. They scratched Jordan Kyrou on Thursday, and they still won. They beat the Buffalo Sabres in that game. What do you think of St. Louis's start to the season and Jordan Kyrou?
Yeah, a lot of frustration there. Obviously with the start they're at, they had a hot run through the second half of last season to make the playoffs, push the Winnipeg Jets about as far as you can push them without winning that. If you remember the Manitoba Miracle that ended that series in the Jets' favor. But, the St. Louis came off a year where they had a lot to feel good about. And it's been a tough sled to start this season. That's not an organization that messes around. I mean, Doug Armstrong, unafraid to make a big, bold move. Obviously in this case, in conjunction with his coach, Jim Montgomery, unafraid to scratch the guy who's led them in goals the last 3 years, and Jordan Kyrou, to send a message to the team. I don't know. It's still a little early for me to say where this is going yet, but they definitely could be a team looking for a shakeup at a certain point in time. I think they have to figure out first, can we get back out of this group again? Is it just a sluggish start? Does some message sending? I mean, a 3-0 win's a pretty good place to start in Buffalo. Can that be a build or a swing in their season towards something more prosperous? What I will say is that if they don't get winning more games, then it's going to get awfully uncomfortable because no one's going to feel too safe in the Blues organization. I just feel this is the last full season for Doug Armstrong as the GM. He's going sort of full time into the president's role next year. With Alex Steen is taking over as GM. You're gonna want to see him set the table for Steen. And Steen, he's already an important part. I mean, in some ways, this is just changing titles and then starting to transition to a change. The change won't happen overnight. It's not like June 30th to July 1st. It's like poof, Doug, you're gone. After running this team for 15, 20 years, whatever it's been, and now Alex Steen, you're in charge of everything. But it reminds me a little of what you saw David Poile do his last season in Nashville. Remember, he made some big trades, got all those draft picks at the time, got the 5 picks in the Tanner Jeannot deal with Tampa, and traded some other guys out the door, Matthias Ekholm. He was setting the table. I don't think they've reached that conclusion yet in St. Louis, but maybe we could get to a circumstance where there's sort of a passing of the torch and some difficult decisions that are going to be made by the outgoing GM before the new guy takes over. I mean, I think they got to figure that out this month, and that's why you see them pushing the buttons they are right now.
Before I move off of St. Louis, and this player I'm mentioning will get mentioned throughout the show for different reasons. Jordan Binnington's record right now, 3.52, 3.34 goals against average, 8.59 save percentage. In the context of Hockey Canada, how do we feel about that stat line?
I love that he took the 900 goal puck, by the way. I thought that was
I thought that was hella annoying. Okay,
What?
we should properly introduce this topic.
Whoa,
okay?
you didn't like that?
No, I think that was super. Let's just introduce this topic properly, okay? Alexander Ovechkin, the first and only
No
player
Fun
to
Police
reach-
is hosting this
No. I'm Jordan Binnington on the No Fun. No, there's so many other people you could say that with me, but Jordan Binnington, no, I'm not taking that crap. Hell nah, that dude's a no, absolutely not. No. Okay, Alexander Ovechkin scores goal number 900. Jordan Binnington keeps the puck for himself. And he says he was going to give it back to Alexander Ovechkin. I don't believe that for 1 second. You mean to tell me Jordan Binnington? No, I don't believe that for a second. Stop.
Well,
Stop.
I do. I don't think he was going to destroy the puck in the parking lot.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I just thought it was super annoying, dude. Like, it's a milestone puck. You got beat. Let Alexander Ovechkin have it. Don't pocket it for yourself. Come on.
He's got a few milestone pucks, Ovi. Does it really matter? Like, what's
It's
one?
900 goals. How many other people have scored 900 goals?
I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. I don't think he was ever going to.
I thought it was so annoying.
I don't think he was ever going to steal it. I just thought it was funny.
I think it's just annoying, and it's just another episode of Jordan Binnington making a moment about himself when it shouldn't be. That's what I think.
Do you know what moment he made about himself? The overtime of the Four Nations final.
Yeah,
when
he did an
insane.
amazing job in that. He was an insane goaltender in that moment.
If you get time, I would urge you to watch back that overtime. Like, it's easy to forget how outrageously good the opportunities the U.S. had to score in that overtime period.
Dominant overtime period from Jordan Binnington. I'm allowed to look at a player like Jordan Binnington and respect him in big moments like that, where he was able to put the team on his back and win a massive high stakes game for his country, and also look at moments like keeping a puck or throwing a water bottle at Nazem Kadri and be like, you're annoying. I'm allowed to do that.
Well,
the duality
you're
of
definitely
man.
entitled to your opinion. I'm not here to rob it of you, but I just thought it was funny myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you know what you might not have seen? And we didn't talk about this in the chat, but so after, I mean, okay, I don't have much to say about Ovechkin getting 900. It's just like, it was inevitable. You just got 895 last year and set a new record for the league. 900 is huge, though. I mean, that's a plateau no one stood on, but I mean, the same is true when he gets 901 and 902 and 903. But 900 is a big round number. So, but I was watching the Capitals put out a video that night in which, they're dousing him with some Stella Artois there in the dressing room. And then Spencer Carberry, their head coach, comes in and he's addressing the team, saying what you'd expect about Ovechkin. But then he goes, LT, Logan Thompson, the Capitals goalie, LT, statement win. And the camera cuts over to Logan Thompson and he's literally doing this, Julian. He's doing like,
I don't want this.
That Vince McMahon, like, kind of like cut.
Yeah. Get it.
And what's interesting is because, well, what did that all mean, you say? Well, Logan Thompson, also Canadian-born goaltender. He was at the other end of the ice that night from Jordan Binnington, who might have been in the press box, but the Blues GM, Doug Armstrong, who just happens to be in charge of Team Canada's selection. Look, Binnington start aside, Julian, I think we all know he's going to be one of the three goalies selected for this team. He is Doug Armstrong's ride or die. But that doesn't mean the other selections aren't important. A, because he may struggle at the Olympics and Canada might need to turn to a second or third goalie. And B, maybe he's not even the first goalie, depending on how things go between now and the start of the tournament in February. And Logan Thompson is very much in the mix for this team. In fact, if you're just going on numbers, he's the best Canadian goalie right now. But, he's got some history. Logan himself has owned this. He was not the easiest guy to work with when he was a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. Just so happens 2 members of Team Canada's coaching staff worked with him in Vegas. Pete DeBoer and Bruce Cassidy are both assistant coaches on John Cooper's staff. So that's intel that obviously Hockey Canada had when it made the call at the Four Nations. I do think that there's been an effort here to clear the air. Like, it's not like he can't make the team, but he wants to be there, right? And sorry, that's such a long story to get to the point, but I just thought it was interesting where he's going like, cut, because he doesn't want to be part of joking around about that. Like, I think he really wants to just put on his work boots, keep letting his numbers do the talking in terms of his performance on the ice. He doesn't want any bulletin board material or make it look like he's not going to be a good teammate, because frankly, he wants to represent Team Canada at the Olympics. And so it's going, the goaltending decision, as much as we haven't really talked about goaltending because Jordan Binnington did perform at such a good level at the Four Nations, I think it's going to rear its head again. Like, I think there will be concerns about Canada's goaltending and when it comes to the men's team as they get back to the Olympics in February.
If you had to pick the 3 goaltenders right now, Binnington, Thompson, who's your number 3?
So I would go with a more veteran number 3 in that case. And I'm probably either going to Jake Allen, who's had a nice start in New Jersey, or Darcy Kemper, who's obviously done it before, won a Stanley Cup in Colorado, had a great year last year. His numbers aren't sparkling quite as much early in the season. That's probably where I'm going. What I'm telling you there then is 2 of the goalies that were last year with Team Canada wouldn't be going. Samuel Montembeaul's had a very difficult start with the Montreal Canadiens. That gives me some concern. And then you've got Aiden Hill, who's been out injured in Vegas. And so it's more just the lack of games and the injury status of Hill that gives me pause. But that's what I would be thinking right now if I was picking the team in the second. But we'll get a little bit more. I mean, Team Canada's meeting the management group Sunday, Monday, this weekend in Toronto. So, hopefully we'll get to better, not that they're including the media in those meetings, but maybe we'll get some intel and some nuggets will drop out of that meeting in terms of what they're thinking. But that's how I look at it at this stage of the season.
I imagine in those meetings too, not only will they be discussing goaltending, but Macklin Celebrini's chances. You mentioned him earlier, off to an amazing start to his season. When we spoke about Celebrini last, we talked about, could it be Celebrini versus Bedard? Obviously, Bedard's still off to a really good start, but Macklin Celebrini in his sophomore year, man, what a guy.
It's because every game you're not seeing a fall off, right? Like we had that conversation a few days ago, and then the goal he scores against Seattle this week. Like, I just think that, it's still incumbent upon him. He's going to, this team isn't going to be picked till the end of December. So the San Jose Sharks have a bunch of games. Presumably Macklin Celebrini has a bunch of games to play between now and when it's selected. So he's got to keep performing at a level, but he starts to feel a little bit undeniable when you just don't see that fall off. And he's up there right now, tied with, McDavid and Jack Eichel. Like he's arrived, like he's here. And it's not just now projecting talent or long-term outcomes. I think like you're seeing it on a daily basis. He also plays a really important role on the Sharks. And even the Sharks have started to win a few games. Like I realize they're climbing up from the depths. So I'm not saying that they're striking fear into every opponent's, hearts when they come into a game with San Jose, but I think they're starting to earn back some respect, and he's a big part of that. And so the way I view this, quite honestly, if I was picking the team today, he's on it. That doesn't mean he's 100% going to be there. I think you have to allow for the possibility that, he does fall off or other players come on and Hockey Canada will be left with a difficult decision, but he's doing something at a young age that it's really hard to do. Jonathan Toews played at 21 in Vancouver. Drew Doughty played at 20 in Vancouver. I think Simon Gagner, I want to say in Salt Lake City, was like 21, 22. He was a young player at that time. There's not been very many players that have made Team Canada in the best on best Olympic era as young. And in fact, Celebrini would be the youngest. Where he benefits, like Team Canada messed up. They should have taken Sidney Crosby in 06. But what I'll say about that in a slight bit of defense is that was Sidney Crosby's first season. So you're making that call as Hockey Canada after seeing him play like 25 NHL games. It's a little bit like what Matthew Schaefer, I think, is up against as a defenseman for this team. Is like he's played in like there's no one is even I have no but with any part of his start with the Islanders. The only but in the back of my mind is can he sustain this level of play? He's never played against men. He hasn't played this competitive of a schedule. I mean the teams are like it's not crazy to imagine between the time when you have to name them and when they perform that like there's some kind of drop off there. It's not saying he has no chance to make the team. I just think it's very unlikely. It's hard to pick a rookie. Because Team Canada doesn't have to pick rookies, right? Like, if you bring Matthew Schaefer or Macklin Celebrini or Connor Bedard, guess who you're leaving off? You're leaving off like a Stanley Cup champion. You're leaving off a 500-plus game NHL guy. You're leaving off a guy who's who's been through every big moment and proven it to you. Like that's the other side of this. It's not just like, I'm not saying these players can't play for Team Canada, but you have to remember, for any one of them that you add, it's excluding someone that would otherwise be on the roster. And the players you're taking off to put one of those or more of those guys on, they've done a lot in their careers. They give you a little bit more safety. And, as it was described to me, we're expecting a man's game over there. They're also expecting it to be very difficult hockey. Obviously, the stakes are so high when you're a country like Canada and you get into all those single game eliminations. I still think Macklin Celebrini, he's got a legit. If I had the odds, I say 80% chance right now of making the team.
Wow,
I think he's been that good. And there's been some other players that have been there whose numbers anyway aren't popping. Now, that's the other thing of this. Team Canada's management group, for good or ill, they're not just sorting on NHL.com by Canadian forwards and picking the team that way. They're not as interested in that. I think obviously they're thinking about roles. Most of the top 6 in this team is spoken for. People forget they've already named 5 forwards to the roster. And the only question in that 5 forwards I would have a question about is where Braden Point plays. He could, in theory, be on your third line, but at least 4 of those forwards are going to be top 6 members of the team. And potentially 5 of them. And so, when they're picking the team too, they're really picking the bottom 6 and the extra forwards specifically. Mitch Marner still hasn't been added officially to the team. I think it's fair to say he's going to be on there. He could be a top 6 forward, but I guess my point is it's not all just point scoring that's going to win you a job. They're looking really to fill out, what do they want the third line to look like? Where's Mark Stone at? He's been out injured. Can Brandon Hagel continue his rebound? He had a slow start to the year. He started to come around. Is Anthony Cirelli still in the mix? Seth Jarvis, he's had a nice start, but he was probably a bubble guy. Is Travis Konechny back there? Does Sam Bennett? Might sound crazy, but Sam Bennett's not had a hot start for Florida, but he also played pretty well, I think, when he got in there in the Four Nations and obviously won the Conn Smythe Trophy for Florida last year. So there's a lot that goes into these decisions, more than just who's scoring points in October and November. But I feel like Celebrini, he won a lot of people over at the Worlds. He's obviously, he looks like a Crosby. I don't want to say anyone's a Crosby clone because that's almost unfair, but he plays the game, the way he grinds along the boards. He's such a conscientious player, but he's obviously got some game breaking ability offensively too. To me, he could fit on a third line for Canada, but it's going to mean leaving someone more experienced with a trophy case full of awards off. And that's going to be the decision that they have to grapple with here as they meet in the next few days.
The more you talk about Hockey Canada, the more we need to do that episode of you projecting the entire Hockey Canada roster for 2026. Goodness. But no, I'm with you. Celebrini has a chance. Matthew Schaefer, just looking at how stacked the list of possibilities for Team Canada on defense, it's so tough. Maybe in 2030 for Matthew Schaefer, not 2026.
Yeah. Look, I'm willing to go far. I'm willing to say there's 100% chance you have a 2030 Canadian men's Olympic team that includes Schaefer, Bedard, and Celebrini. Those guys will be the key drivers at that point in time. It'll be it's so weird to say this. It's so weird. It's going to be an aging Connor McDavid. It'll be he'll be in the older guy role. Who knows? Sidney Crosby, I'm not going to put anything against him, but let's face it, Sidney Crosby might be picking that team. Who knows? He might go the Steve Yzerman route.
Yeah, he might be. You think he has a GM? Do you think he could be a GM? Is that something he even wants to do?
I don't know. I think his hockey brain, there's nothing he couldn't do. It becomes a question of how does he want to spend his time and energy and effort. He's put everything into his career. Look at where we are. He's right up at the league leaders in goals right now.
Yeah.
Someone said to me, does he know that they've already put him on the team? He doesn't have anything to prove.
He almost got a hat trick last night.
Exactly. But I think Sidney Crosby could literally do anything he wants in hockey and in life for that matter. I just don't know where his priorities are going to be personally, because it's a huge sacrifice of time, to be a GM. But, it's a little different too. You could, when you're picking just a Team Canada, that's a full-time job for 6 months, but it's not like it's not like Steve Yzerman running the Detroit Red Wings every day on the phone with agents and dealing with, GMs deal with things like stick budgets and, personality. Just there's a lot of stuff that isn't even just related to the trades and signings and everything that we focus on.
Since we mentioned Sidney Crosby, really quickly before I make you do a Leafs corner, did you watch any of the Ovechkin versus Crosby matchup on Thursday, the 99th meeting, including playoffs between those two guys?
I did, and my weird takeaway is there's still juice there. Like, after all these years, and, look, the Penguins have had a great start to the season. So, it's in the context for them. That's a division game, and they're thinking of, their players that are playing the game that are deciding whether or not there's a competitive aspect to it, are trying to get every point in the standings they can. And they got two of them, and to put themselves in a good playoff spot. But what I thought was kind of cool in watching that one, I did catch most of it, is just how much energy and there's clearly a respect now. Like, there was a time that was hate. It really was hate, because one stood in the way of the other getting to where they wanted to go, right? If you go all the way back to that 2009 series, but then also when they played those three in a row, 16, 17, and 18. Well, the team that won those series in each of those years won the cup. The Penguins in 16 and 17, the Capitals in 18. Like, it used to be fierce and heated, and, I think it's sort of softened around the edges. You see Crosby, that they had a mic'd up moment. He's like, wow, you got it back. Nice time for a backhand there on that 900th goal. And Karlsson comes over and congratulates him, Erik Karlsson, and says, like, I was there for your 500th too. That was like 10 years ago. And like, so you see them, I think there's obviously a lot more respect there. They're commiserating a little bit more, but still, it was, for an early November game, it was great to watch them go back and forth. And obviously, Pittsburgh gets ahead by 3, surrenders the lead in the second period, but finds a way to pull out in the third. It was a fun game. And, the nostalgia kind of came out for me. I covered some of those series over the years. I was way back at that outdoor game, unfortunately, where Crosby suffered his initial concussion, was between those teams. Still like to pour one out for that original behind the scenes Winter Classic show with those two teams. I mean, they've written a lot of a sort of generation of hockey for the NHL. They've been two of the main characters, both Ovechkin and Crosby, but also the teams they play for.
One thing I wish we would have gotten, I don't know if it'll end up being too late at this point to do, but it would have been so cool if we would have gotten an all-star game weekend where Ovechkin picks his team, Crosby picks his team, and you center the all-star weekend around two of your best players and that rivalry. I think that's a missed opportunity. It would have been so cool.
Whoa. Tap the brakes. If Ovechkin plays one more season, there's an all-star game next season. Even if he doesn't, I don't think you could rule that guy coming out in that moment and doing it, even if he's retired. I don't think it's impossible. I mean, maybe it doesn't make as much sense, but
yeah, you kind of need Ovechkin still playing.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Or a situation where they're years down the line where they're not playing, but at that point, like, you've kind of missed the boat a little bit.
There's some people saying he wants to get to 1,000 goals. I think that's impossible. I'm just going to go out and say what I think. It took 200 games for him to go from 800 to 900, exactly 200 games, which is still absurd. He's still scoring at half a goal a game that deep in his career in that 100 goal stretch. But let's just imagine he can somehow continue doing that. Like, does he have another 200 games in him? He's got 60 left this season. Does he have 2 more full years of staying healthy in him and then also scoring half a goal a game? I mean, I don't know. If anyone can do it, it's him, but I just don't see it. I don't think it's possible.
But anyway, like, it would have been cool if we would have gotten that, like, in their primes.
But if he plays next season, though, I think we would endorse that as an idea.
Absolutely. Like, we'd be pushing for that idea in Long Island, because the All-Star game would be in Long Island, correct?
Yeah, where he set the goals record.
Ooh.
Returns to the scene of the crime, too.
See? Look, free idea for the NHL.
I'm actually pretty sure, I think the Islanders are the team that Crosby has the most points against of any NHL opponent, too.
Oh, they're going to love that idea.
Both of these guys have feasted on the Islanders. Now they come back to win an All-Star game. No one's going to remember who won. Anyway, yeah, I mean, look, look, there's the makings of something there. If I don't know if we're going to go back to the traditional All-Star game. I don't know where that's at.
That's a whole episode in itself. Yeah. Okay. we've bounced around, so let's get ourselves centered back. Actually, wait, I forgot to mention the jersey swap at the end with Malkin and Ovechkin. That was cool too. Unless that was mentioned before.
No, soccer style. No, kind of reminded me of what you see in professional soccer.
Yeah, I loved it. It was super cool. I mean, obviously we make it about Ovechkin and Crosby, but Malkin was in the same draft class.
Well, Ovechkin has the all-time stick collection from this generation too. So like, I'd love to see, I hope he puts all that stuff on display somewhere in retirement. Cause I think he's got like a crazy memorabilia collection from this 20 years of NHL hockey. Okay.
Now let's do Leafs Corner. We've mentioned it on previous episodes, David Kampf. What's the latest with him? The news coming out about him being suspended for not going to the Marlies. Like, what's going on with him and his contract situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a situation. Puckpedia had that on Thursday night that Kampf is formally suspended, meaning he's not receiving pay, meaning he doesn't count against the Leafs daily cap this week. And really where we're at is, for anyone who's kind of maybe not totally up to speed on the story, he was scratched. This is a veteran player scratched in 13 of 14 playoff games last year by the Leafs. Came to training camp, didn't win a job on a team that has a lot of forwards. They still got a lot of forwards in the Leafs organization. He cleared waivers at the end of camp. He was sent to the Toronto Marlies. He hadn't been in the AHL in 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it was, and played 4 games for the Marlies and was not feeling it. But he's got a blessing and a curse. The blessing is he's got a contract that pays him pretty handsomely till the end of next season. And the curse is, that contract is largely what's keeping him out of being in the NHL. I think actually entirely. I know there are NHL teams that could use what David Kampf does, but they don't want to pay him $2.25 million a season to do it. And so he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. And so last weekend, he left the Marlies, was given some time to think about his future. The suspension kicks in at that point in time, and we're going to have one of 3 outcomes from this situation. Outcome number 1, David Kampf is traded to another organization. The problem, as I mentioned with that, is not too many teams are eager to take on his contract liability. The Leafs are not in the mood to just take back some garbage contract coming back. Like, I think if their choice is, they'd rather him just stay then, versus taking on a player they don't really want. Because there is a set of circumstances. It's unlikely, but there's a set of circumstances he could play for the Leafs again, right? If they get into injury trouble, he's not that far down the list of players before they would call up. The second potential option, Julian, is he terminates the deal. And if they terminate the contract, the reason that isn't too palatable if you're David Kampf or his accountant or his family member is that he would be walking away from roughly $3.3 million. Now, he would become an unrestricted free agent. He could sign somewhere else and make back some of that money. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, let's assume he can't make back all that money. So he's leaving money on the table if he does that. The third option, which I think is still possible, is he returns to the Marlies, resumes his playing obligations, which is playing for the team, practicing when they have practice times, resumes getting paid, still counts on the Leafs cap, and he still gets his money. And he's just got to kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of suck it up and see what happens down the season. I don't know where it's going to go. I mentioned on our show at the start of the week that I had heard it was going towards a termination. I do think that was at a certain point in time, there were people around the Marlies that believe that's what was going to happen. But obviously that hasn't yet happened. It's a lot of money to walk away from. And so, the one thing I'll say is there's sort of confusion out there on how a contract termination works. Sometimes you see teams refer to it as a mutual termination. That isn't actually a thing in the CBA. And so just so you understand from a procedural standpoint, this is what happens if the parties get to a point where they're going to terminate a deal. Julian, I'm your employer. You're unhappy with this job. You want to become a free agent. What I say to you, and often this is an understanding, but is okay, you got to not show up for work one day. And so you don't show up for work. What I do is I suspend you. I formally send you a letter and say, you're in breach of your contract. You didn't show up to work on Tuesday. After that point, I can then terminate the deal because you're in breach of your contract. And so they've taken the steps towards that. David Kampf didn't show up to work. Again, it doesn't mean there's a big fight like this. I'm just trying to illustrate, but they're at the point where the Leafs could terminate his contract if he doesn't want to continue on playing for them. But We'll just have to see where it lands. I think we'll know probably by the time this episode's out, but it's still a worthy explainer of how we got here. Everything, as far as I can tell, is quite amicable. The Leafs are giving Kampf room and time to decide. There's a sort of procedural thing that happens in the background in case they do move to terminate the deal. And he's got to decide, do you take the money or not? And I'll tell you, do you know what David Kampf does pretty well? Stays on the right side of the puck. Like, he can play on your fourth line. He has taken over 6,000 faceoffs as an NHL player. He's won 51.4% of them. So he's above average by definition.
It's a good rate.
In the faceoff dot. Been a pretty good penalty killer. He will get another job if the contract gets terminated. Like a team like the Montreal Canadiens, they don't have a left shot center on their roster. You can't tell me they wouldn't use a player like him. Again, just in a fourth line role, very limited, but like he has attributes that a team like that would find appealing, and it doesn't end in Montreal. So it's a bit of a Faustian bargain if you could put yourself in his shoes. Like, do I take less money but get to kind of keep living the dream in the NHL? This is a player, by the way, probably going to the Olympics for Czechia. I mean, not a slam dunk, but I think he's going to be a member of their team. So he's even got to think about that. Like, is it best for me to be playing NHL games ahead of that tournament? Or if I'm in the AHL, the problem the Marlies have in the AHL, they have a lot of veteran players. There's rules about how many veterans you can dress. They can't even dress all their veterans every night just because they would be in violation of the rules. So like the playing time won't be the same down there. Obviously the level of competition isn't the same. Anyway, I mean, it's one of those things if you can step back from it from 10,000 feet, it's a good problem to have. But the reason he's not in the NHL right now is his contract, and he's got to decide, do I terminate that contract and sign one that's a little bit more in line with what he should be making? Or do you just take the money and ride it out? I mean, I won't criticize him either way. It's his choice. And I think he's going to make it in the next day or two.
Great explanation. Enjoyed the role playing that happened in the middle of that explanation too. I don't know how I'd feel about being your employee, but I appreciate the example.
I was just illustrating how it goes. I mean, the point is you have to wink, wink, not show up for work one day so that I can, send you a suspension letter, and then I send you a letter telling you I'm terminating your deal. That's how it works functionally. So like when Brandon Saad, for example, this happened last year with him in St. Louis, you'll remember, same situation. The Blues couldn't trade him. He made too much money at the time, but there were other opportunities out there for him. He had to sort of formally not show up to work one day, get a suspension letter. The Blues terminated his contract and he signed in Vegas. That's the way it works. It's not really a mutual termination, but there is kind of an understanding, generally speaking, between the parties. Now, there are times someone just doesn't show up for work and then the team says, all right, you're in breach of your contract. We're terminating you. Anyway, I don't know how much CBA minutia the audience has patience for on this weekend, but
still worthwhile. Before we get you all to stick taps, I do want to shout out an article you worked on this week. The Mammoth have arrived as an NHL playoff contender ahead of schedule with room left to grow. Chris Johnston wrote that for The Athletic. You checked in with Bill Armstrong, their GM over there. What are your thoughts on the Utah Mammoth?
Really interesting team. And maybe we'll just sort of put it aside. We'll just sort of tease this a little bit, but I think that they've had a great start to the year, 9-5-0, right? Their team, their goal is to make the playoffs, and they had a tough schedule. They're among those teams that has a tough schedule to start the season. They put themselves in position where they're credibly still chasing the playoffs. I think that's job one. But they've really done a nice job with their rebuild. If you look at how they got to where they are, their entire second line is a product of the rebuild. They drafted Logan Cooley, they drafted Dylan Guenther, and then JJ Peterka, the player who's the third member of that. Of course, they made the trade with Buffalo in the offseason. They got him for Josh Doan, who they drafted in this rebuilding process in 2021, and Michael Kesselring, who they got as a throw-in when they were selling Nick Bjugstad to the Edmonton Oilers during the rebuild. So, they have a 20-year-old Dmitry Simishev is playing big minutes on their blue line. Like they still got guys coming. So I just think I want to put it on your radar. They're a team that I think could make some noise short term. They have the picks and prospects to make a big trade this year. I'm not saying it's a guarantee they will, but I think they'll look at it. And if not, they're just going to keep being patient. And if they do this right and they get, some bounces, look, you got to get some luck, and usually in this sort of stuff, but they could be a team that's a real force for years to come. So yeah, they're one of the great stories to start this season, and enjoyed spending some time with their people and writing that story.
Be sure to check it out on The Athletic. Subscribe to The Athletic if you haven't done so already. Do you have a stick tap before we get out of here? You could easily go to any of the players we've mentioned in this episode who established a big milestone this week. So Ovechkin, Kadri, whoever.
My stick tap is to whoever was involved with designing Hockey Canada's Olympic jerseys. I see them getting a lot of hate online. I don't really understand it. And I think they look pretty sharp. And I think everyone is going to have their complaints in November, and then they're going to see these things on the ice in February, and they'll become iconic, probably depending on how the results go for the teams, the women's team, the men's team, and the para team. But still, if they're successful games for the Canadian teams, everyone is going to want one of these under their Christmas tree or for their next birthday or what have you. So anyway, I just thought they were pretty sharp. Style icon CJ says endorse.
I love new nickname alert, style icon CJ. I think the jerseys are okay. See a lot of people dumping on the black jerseys. They're okay. The white ones are the best ones of all.
They're going to look sick if they wear those, I think. Anyway.
Yeah.
I like getting in early on the takes so that we can roll this back out in February when everyone's going nuts about how awesome the jerseys are. And I'm going to be like,
remember when Uncle CJ was first on this?
Unc was sitting on the corner saying, "You're going to want that jersey, son."
He's sitting on his stupid cupboard being like, I told you.
You wanted those Celebrini digits on that one. I knew it.
My stick tap, I'll make it easy and just 900 goals is cool. I'll give it to Tony Hawk for congratulating Alexander Ovechkin on hitting 900 because if there's a man who knows about hitting a 900, it's Tony Hawk, skateboarding legend. So it was really cool to see him shout out Alexander Ovechkin this week. So I will give my stick tap to him. Honorable mention to Saturday Night Live for their hilarious sketch last weekend. I don't know if you saw this, CJ, but they did a hilarious sketch involving the Nashville Predators name. And the Predators say they have no intention of changing the name, but I'll let you, it's better you watch it than me explaining it, but people who are listening to the podcast know exactly what I'm talking about. The SNL sketch involving Miles Teller, him wearing a Nashville Predators jersey, and they made a joke on them with their previous shirt saying Preds in the community. I'll let you watch that one, Siege. It's hilarious.
I don't know if that passes the style icon bar.
I don't know if they're going for style on that one. No. It's just a funny sketch. Anyway, it's an honorable mention. Get your questions in for Monday's episode. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, and we'll talk to you all early next week. Great work as always, Siege.
Yeah, you too, bud. That was fun.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.